What's up, everyone? Happy Friday and Happy New Year. Welcome to the game on Pax8 Live, the show where we talk about all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of. In this case, for the past couple of weeks, we've taken a short holiday break, but we're coming back strong with predictions of the future. Matt and I are going to talk about what we think is going to happen for 2024 in cybersecurity. We've got a lot of ideas. Before we dive in, the price for Pax8 Beyond did indeed go up. I warned you several weeks in a row that it's going to go up, but it did. Nonetheless, if you're still thinking of coming, it's still a great deal. So definitely jump over to pax8beyond.com and get signed up. Interact with us today. We would love to hear your thoughts, what you want us to talk about during this episode, so that we can collaborate together and figure out what the hell is going to happen in cybersecurity in the MSP space in 2024. Let's not waste any more time. Let's jump straight into the news.
Happy New Year, Dom Kirby. It's great to see you, brother. I've got an echo of myself back in my ear. It might be me. Okay,
I've got an echo
let's get
of
right
you
into
too.
the news.
Kind of weird.
Mandiant, security firm Google, bought for $5.4 billion, gets their X account hacked. It's so very delicious, Dom. Like, I hate saying this, and I hate the Schadenfreude in it, but Google-owned security firm Mandiant spent several hours trying to regain control of its X account, formerly known as Twitter. I wonder how long they have to do formerly known as Twitter. On Wednesday, after an unknown scammer hijacked it and used to spread a link that attempted to steal cryptocurrency from people who clicked it. So they talk about how they're aware of it. You know, Mandiant kicks it out really quickly. Obviously, they have to in this case. But they said, we've since regained control, and we're currently working on restoring it. So the hacked Mandiant account was initially used to masquerade as one belonging to Phantom, a company that offers a wallet for storing cryptocurrency. Posts on X encouraged people to visit a malicious website, obviously, see if their wallet was one of the 250,000 that were going to be awarded tokens. Eventually, the scammer changed the @Mandiant username and reappeared under a new username after using a new account to promote a fake website. So you see this kind of like, let's get some value out of the views, right? This is a straight-up view, click, value type thing. Mandiant is one of the leading security companies. We know that, right? And they sold them to Google. I think that was back, 2022 for $5.4 billion, right? And Mandiant's the people you all hear about, right? If you're listening to this,
Right.
This is like the preeminent incident response team. Now, they've recently been drugged through the news a little bit lately, right? If you saw, I think it was Alf V trolling Mandiant. I don't know if you remember seeing that one just recently, Dom, but they were like really bad trolling them. I think you sent it to me, actually, right? And so they've been getting kicked, and then now you have this other one where they actually have a failure to protect that. And so they say, last month someone claimed to have discovered the social media site was vulnerable to a reflected cross-site scripting. Dom, you tried to find this link, but obviously couldn't find it now. But clicking on a crafted link and going to some crafted web pages would allow attackers to take over your account. Deleting your account, EGC, a University of California, Berkeley PhD candidate wrote last month. So this was a research article. So we can drop back and let's just chat about it a little bit, Dom. But, you know, one of the things that comes out of this that you brought up before, you just go, you know, exactly what you want to say.
So like, one, I too had to giggle at Mandiant's expense. There's just a lot of irony in that this is the account that got popped, right? We're both going to get punched in the face for it at some point. It's okay.
Oh, for sure. And I love you, Mandiant. I'm not trying to take away from the value you add to this world. But
for sure.
Anyways,
A little funny. Well, let's talk about Twitter or X and really all these platforms. But I think in my whole history, like being a user on the platform, but also just being in the mix of news, Twitter comes up a lot. And it seems that they've had quite the history of these things. Like this one was an XSurf attack or cross-site scripting attack, which isn't an easy it's an easy vulnerability to.
And they are making conjecture here, I think, on how this has played out. I don't believe that was actually saying this exactly. They're just making some conjecture of that. But to your point, they've had several of these type of open vulnerabilities. And even if you took away from the vulnerabilities, right? Like I do a lot of token phishing playing around and testing and doing videos on it. And one of the things that was interesting, well, yeah, that's true. Let's say that. In controlled environments, let's say. And so what's interesting is in a controlled environment like that, Microsoft, you know, if you set it up properly, you can detect it pretty easily. LinkedIn crushes it. If you steal a token in LinkedIn, my account got shut down in seconds, and they warned the real me that fake me had attacked real me, right? And so they were very quick to see that. You don't see that same kind of prowess existing everywhere, right? You don't see that same kind of like once I steal a token, for anybody that doesn't know, like an OAuth, an open authentication, or OIDC, OpenID Connect token, those tokens are kind of the payload that proves I'm me. They're cookies. I store them. And then once I have those, they allow me in. And so sometimes threat actors will try to steal that token in the middle, right, using tools that do that. That's another potential method. So between not only the XSS, the XSurf stuff, all the things that they've done and had those kind of failures and seemingly a poor posture of that front-end security, they also aren't one of those that I've noticed to be very quick at dealing with those other postural aspects or things where a token has been replayed. Like, it doesn't seem they've made that investment outside looking in, to your point.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, and I think, Meta has had a history of the same issues, and it's really a call for all platforms to be dealing with this, right? Like, imagine if that was like the POTUS account, right? Like, there's serious ramifications. Now, I would hope or conject that,
and it's happened before. It's been POTUS's account, right? Like, if you remember, it's actually been, well, not POTUS, but it's been private account. In fact, DIVD, the Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure in the Netherlands, was the first one to crack a president's Twitter account by just the password, if you recall. In this case, it wasn't really a Twitter thing, but certainly opportunities to see that somebody all of a sudden signed in from this account in, I don't know, somewhere in another country, right? Potentially a whole different browser string. And anyways, but I think, to your point of call to all, right? I think when you think about this, I could name a whole host of platforms. I just recently signed up for a new financial management platform, and it only offered one type of MFA, zero other configuration, no other type of security things in front of it. I can't bring SSO to protect it. Yeah. It was SMS, yeah, 100%. But what's interesting is, you think about that. Why can't I bring my SSO? Why don't I have the ability to be in control of this at an authentication or authorization level? And I think that's the first prediction for 2024 and beyond. And I know we're not in the prediction section yet, but I do believe you will see more companies be, from a capitalism demand perspective, more in charge of protecting, in alignment with CISA and the secure by design, secure by default rhetoric, as well as the actual demand from a consumer saying, no, this isn't okay. You have to do better than this, right? And we do have a couple comments that I'm going to bring in. Go ahead, Dom.
We pulled my string because you mentioned financial. Like,
can
we get banks? Can we get banks to catch up on this too? Because like my bank still only offers SMS or some garbage Symantec VIP type thing that's really hard to use for MFA. Yeah.
Quick question. When was the last FFIEC update related to cybersecurity issued?
Oh, that's a great question. When?
2018. Last update to the Information Security Handbook from FFIC was 2018. You wonder why there's not updates? Because we can't even do regulation at a scale and speed of the change in what we're seeing in our world. I think that is the biggest call to action for an industry group to own this, like CompTIA, of anyone I've ever seen, right? Of just this raw understanding. Even when we have a group like FFIC that's responsible for this, they don't issue those guidances in a way that keep up with what we actually see in the threat landscape and what we actually see in those worlds. And that's my prediction, at least, as to why we sit where we sit.
You did.
I was going to say, I got a bunch of comments.
Skip an acronym, though.
Go ahead.
You skipped
what did we miss? FFIC? Oh, hopefully you've looked it up for me, because I have it and I'd have to go get it. But I know. Yeah. Okay. I think it's Federal Financial Institution or interest. It's something around interest rates. I'm sorry. If anybody knows it in chat, get me quicker. Federal Financial Institution Examination Council. Sorry. It spun out, I think, in 1978, 1979. Anyways, sorry, that's side tangent. But we've got some comments. So Daniel Mitchell in Canada. Love my Canadian brother up there. I honor my false Canadian citizenry that I got from Rob Ray on stage. But he says, I wonder when all the ex-employees were cut and laid off, how much of a DevSec teams got hit. Ooh, good call out.
That's
even on that statement. I don't know, but it could certainly play into some of the reason for that. Jonathan Crow says, I was going to say, you mean the two dudes who decided to stay at X and sleep in their cubicles haven't been able to stay on top of everything? Okay, y'all. We're not poking fun at Twitter. And then Brandon Garrett said something I totally believe in. He said, banks need to move to passkeys. And by the way, if you want your comments to show up on screen, go to our YouTube on Pax8 Cloud and actually comment on the YouTube and Pax8 Cloud, and we'll put your comments right up here. Even if it's Matt, you look goofy today. I'm fine with that. Daniel Mitchell continues to dial up. Never mind. Daniel Mitchell continues to say, the amount of platforms that don't allow SSO or hardware tokens in MFA makes me nuts. It's going to leave it right there. 100%. 100%. Okay, sorry. Little side tangent for that. Let's get to the next news article, and I'll beat the hell out of Mandy and X accidentally. This one, Don, this is a Matt trigger. This one triggers me so much, and it's so good. But I'm going to try to fly through it. How a group of trained hackers, trained hackers, but how a group of trained hackers exposed a right to repair nightmare. So, Dragon Sector on stage at German Cybersecurity Conference earlier this month. Polish hackers known as Dragon Sector stood up on a stage at a conference in Germany and said, "Hey, one of Poland's biggest train makers, Newag, has been intentionally breaking their stuff. They've been intentionally making their trains stop functioning." If they didn't go to their repair yards, if you went to some other repair yard and had them fix something, you could actually have your train break down, right? They had an actual destruction of a train on December 21st. And in the code, they found in the code that these guys, when they reverse engineered, when Dragon Sector reverse engineered, they even said, we're 100% sure we're in the right. And then on that conference, they said, we're 100% sure we're acting in public interest. It is Newag that should be scared, not us. And they basically broke down the code and found that in the train, they had a thing that said if when reaching geofence coordinates, sitting still for 10 days, or on one case, a train would simply lock up every year on December 21st. Like, they just straight programmed in, when do I need money for bonuses? Ooh, the 21st is a great cash day. Doop, 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 enter. Right? And so we actually see for the first time someone being proven to have put code in something to destroy something so that you had to pay to fix it. Now, we've seen tangents on this, like Apple, for example, with their battery lawsuit. Right? We saw things like that, but nothing that said set yourself on fire if you don't get revenue from me. Right? Like I just pull my freaking hair out. And this touches on right to repair. And the reason in the article news, we can stop with the article here and just chat about it. But and the reason for this is right to repair. This goes back to John Deere and the current United States lawsuit stuff that's been playing out. This is a GE conversation, as Chris Roberts called out. And so we have a situation where, because the code was protected with digital rights management, as they call it in Poland, and this conversation blew up in Poland, just by the way, it really is, and it says here, even if go ahead, sorry.
No, I just said, imagine it blew up. That's
it's huge, right? This would be like GE being found to have caused that problem, which means now when shipping goods costs more because the trains break down, I'm now paying for it as a consumer. Right, and that's the point. And so, we talk about this: repairs and modernization represent a significant portion of the company's total revenue. It says includes a much larger volume of services than just repairs. Yeah, but you made a way to force people to come repair. If they sat still, which meant they were being worked on somewhere other than your yard, they were going to shut down. That should be illegal, and it's been protected. And this goes all the way back. And I'll say, and I'm getting on my dang pedestal here, just because it's really frustrated. Is that this goes back to my middle theory conversation. Right, and the middle theory just simply said is that products never rise much above or fall much below the maturity of the consuming entity. Meaning, if no one's demanding it, and if there's just unfettered ability for it to go where it's going to go, if nobody cares about the security or nobody cares about these things that could be existing, then you're allowed to do it. There's not enough sophistication to stop me. There's nobody that cares. And I think we're in that part of this world where people have been making code that's been obfuscated to run stuff, that now the argument of right to repair, and Dom, I don't know if you want to tell people what right to repair is in your own words. It might be helpful for people, but are you familiar with the right to repair movement and the conversation with that?
The general idea is that if I buy a thing, like, let's use the Apple example because it's the most well-known. If I buy an iPhone, I should have the right to make repairs to said iPhone if it breaks, right? So that could be the batteries were the big one. You can't replace the battery. Which honestly, that would make sense because Lion loves to explode. But in general, like, I should be able to source a part, and if I am capable enough, install it myself. And I think the bigger conversation that I'm interested in is these small business third-party repair shops without going through ridiculous amounts of scrutiny and training and paying for the right to stick the Apple sticker on the door or whatever company to be able to do those repairs for other consumers. So it's the idea that you can't trap me in a product that I can't take care of myself.
Yeah. And I could see an argument as an Apple that you care about the image of your product so much that you care about those things, that this is kind of something that you want to require for that. The problem is, and this has been this ongoing thing for years and years, right, is this right to repair conversation. But now when you have evidence of somebody obfuscating code with the sole intention of making code that's my proprietary information.
That's malware.
But now,
I don't even care.
Doing malware. Yeah, Daniel Mitchell said, ransomware by design? Like, yeah, pretty much. That's ransomware by design, RBD. This is RBD as a service, RBDAS. Anyways, I think the point is on this one, we're going to see more of this, and I think what we'll really find is the corruption that prevails. And this is my next prediction, probably of where we're heading in the future. But the corruption that prevails by nature of existing in a market that has no regulation, creating software that has nobody to check on it, no consumer safety in mind. And it was said really well in, I think it's 3.3 of the National Cybersecurity Strategy. It said oftentimes the vulnerable population bear the impact where the corporation has made the profit. And I'm summating, but the point being, at some point, it always shifts to that car manufacturer to make safe cars, not just the consumer to protect themselves. And we're living in a world where not only does the consumer have to protect themselves, there are laws and protections in place that allow those corporations to abuse that position. We're seeing it play out right now. And I think we'll see more of those show up in the next few years, where we really have seen evidence that people have forced a hardware lifecycle reset just because of software choices and abusing that capability. So anyways,
but let's draw delineation real quick, because I saw the most ridiculous thing online where this it was like this mom bought her 7-year-old an iPhone or something, but it wasn't to give to the 7-year-old. They were to give it to them when they were 13. And I thought that was the most ridiculous thing, because it's going to be so outdated. So there's a difference.
You're 7 generations late.
Yeah, there's a difference between technology naturally aging out, or in some ways the Apple case was like Li-ion only has so many cycles before it can't take it. Lithium-ion only has so many cycles before it can't take a charge anymore, right?
Yep.
That's different than what we're talking about here, where they sabotaged the product, or the idea where Apple may have or may not have written code to make the battery life worse. Those are very different concepts than technology does indeed age out. Do not count on your phone lasting you 15 years.
And in the same way, we're different. In the past, if I bought a shovel, there was no more attachment point from me and that shovel to the company that made the shovel. Like I don't need that.
Right.
There's nothing else I have to have. Even in a John Deere perspective, prior to the software side of this, theoretically, as long as my tractor worked, other than the right to repair challenge before technology, that whole conversation, right, of John Deere's dealer structure and the way they function. If it wasn't for the software, there isn't this remaining onus between me and that entity that made this product. But now that products have a life cycle of software in them, there's almost this permanence that exists there. Right? Like if I don't update Apple in the next 7 months, I will be pwned easily. Right? And so at some point, like there is this aspect of, we're not just manufacturing a product, you own all the responsibility. And maybe this is the prediction. Damn it, Dom, you took us right into a prediction. I think we are going to start seeing more SRM understanding. I think that's a definition here.
Okay.
You don't need a shared responsibility matrix other than your product can't have been with defects when I bought it. Other than that, it's going to live its lifetime and I'm going to buy a new car. But when you start putting software involved, and this is actually a hot topic, how long do software manufacturers for cars have to update their cars? If this car might have lasted 22 years in the past, but the average life cycle of a cell phone is 5 years, then now we have this, what do you do if you're a car manufacturer? So I don't want to make this to seem like a simple problem. I think there are both sides of it. So I do believe we will see a better understanding of what am I responsible for? What is this vendor responsible for? What's our long-term look like? I don't know that's a 2024 prediction, but I do think we're heading towards that aspect as time goes forward, that we'll have to understand what they're responsible for and what I am before I make an educated buying decision. Right? Like that's going to be a big difference in that. So you'll start seeing SRM extend.
SRM on the window sticker. I kind of like it. It's a good idea.
Yeah. By the way, SRM, shared responsibility matrix. I don't want to miss calling my own points. It's early this year. I want to get ahead. And have we reset the counter, by the way, production team? Are we starting at 0 again this year? Or are we running with the show? Oh, I'm sorry, Steve. Okay, we'll keep it on count. All right, fair. Fair enough. Well, first show of the year, 140 is where we started, minus whatever we've done this show. You can look it back. But all right, cool. So let's get to the last article on this one. And I knew we were going to talk a lot about these before we moved on. Dom, you want to tackle this one for me?
Yeah. We're still talking about Citrix. Here we are. Granted, this one isn't super new. It did happen over the break. But so Comcast, we all know who Comcast is. We all absolutely love their internet and customer service. They're the best.
Oh, it's great. It's the best.
Operating as Xfinity, blah, blah, blah. Data breach reporting over 35 million individuals, present company included, discovered during routine cybersecurity exercise in October, between October 16 and 19, exploiting a Citrix software vulnerability called Citrix Bleed. Wow.
No.
Usernames, hash passwords, contact details, last four social security numbers, that sucks. Birth dates, that sucks. Secret questions and answers, that doesn't suck for me. They're random, but they're probably not random for a lot of people.
Yeah.
What operations were unaffected, so this was a straight smash and grab. And that's pretty much it, right? There's some history here. They've gone through a few different incidents, some credential stuffing type attacks, which you can't really fully put on them. MFA bypass, which they are one of those that are guilty of shitty MFA. So that's pretty much that, right? It says the impact right there: sensitive data loss, information theft. This is a significant bug, right? I don't remember. Citrix Bleed came out. Was it November?
Yeah.
Or was it? So this might have occurred.
Well, I think it's earlier than that, actually. Yeah, I think I thought Citrix Bleed was out. You can check it out. It was an earlier CVE, if I remember. But the point being, I think that you take away from this is the impact to the end user is already being known.
So the
right?
patch came out in early October.
Yep.
But the exploits started occurring in August.
That makes sense. And that also puts Xfinity not necessarily in that timeline, probably well within non being culpable as a challenge there, right? Like if you think about it, that's only Aux 16 to 11. That's probably well within patch cycles in my mind. Yeah. But the point I think that you take away from this is they're collecting a lot of data. Do they really need my date of birth to give me cable? What's the purpose? Plug in there. Right? Like, where are we at? There's an address, a place to turn it on, a place to turn it off. Is it attribution? And if so, like, why was there not protections in place for that data to be segmented and not necessarily directly available? And just a lot of those same basic principles. Sunil, you and I, for the Red a Boom pre-day that we're doing, are going to be breaking down actual breaches by their broken safeguards in the lens of the cyber defense matrix, right? So we're going to go all the way down to the safeguard and look at that and then bring that up as the lens in the cyber defense matrix. And the interesting part is it always comes back to basics, Dom. It always comes back to these things where it's like, why did that data need to have its existence where it was in that place? Like, what was the thoughts on how we segmented and protected? How much comes into play when one Citrix Bleed vulnerability turns into that extensibility? Anyways, I digress, but I just want to make sure if you're a Comcast or Xfinity customer, there's paths for you to gain I think
sort of ranted about this
monitoring and such. I remember that now.
Yeah, they are offering monitoring and such. Well, all right, another tangent. It's a good thing it's just us on this show, man. Our guests would be pissed.
This is great. This is fantastic. We can just do this. The timer can just run. Right? Yeah.
Let's talk about identity monitoring for just a second, because I've been in so many damn breaches, and I actually just got Aura, and it found more that other services didn't find. So, like, my stuff's out there. It is what it is. I was also in the
affiliate
OPM
link
breach.
for Aura, but do it. Yeah, and if you just tell them Dom
not sponsored.
Yeah.
But you only really need one. I just want to be clear. You do not need 52 monitoring services monitoring. If you have one comprehensive service. So in today's world, we're fortunate enough we get Aura at a discount, like through employee benefits. But even a service similar to Aura or some credit monitoring service that you buy and you budget for and you just always have is a great idea. So I just want to point that out. Just go buy something, use it religiously, and just have that be what you use. Because I used to do that, and I had like 10 different services, and it sucked. End rants.
Yeah. And then treat those with a lot of sensitive response, right? Like when you get a monitoring service like an Aura or I don't care, there's tons of them, right? But if you get one of those and they send you something, vet it instantly.
Yes.
It's all about time in a lot of these things. And you really, and this goes back to even a Mandiant or anyone. If you have time on your side and you can catch something earlier, you can respond faster, you can detect quicker, you can respond better, you can recover quicker, then all of those things serve upon themselves, right?
Think about like the credit.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you get a credit inquiry and you didn't just apply for credit, you have a very short window to stop a line of credit from being issued, right? Like, call whoever ran the credit.
Exactly. And say, hey, that's not me. We need to deal with it and lock the credit. I mean, there's just tons of things. So just don't forget that when you have these breaches and your personal information is out there, aside from the passwords, which we will tackle, and maybe that'll come up in predictions. We'll see. In fact, no, dang it, right now. We'll do this before Robin Harris. I think you will see a higher adoption of password managers in the general populace that segments off actual duplicated different passwords. I was in an Uber yesterday, and the Uber girl was like, man, I got this call on my Uber app, and it was this guy telling me I just won $100 extra for all the rides I'd done today, and he wanted me to do this, and he wanted to see that, and I realized, oh my God, he's actually in my app, and he's compromised it, and I was like, well, and she goes, how do I protect myself? And my wife actually stands up, Kat, she goes, get a password manager. Don't use the same password everywhere. She says, I do use that same password everywhere. And I did have if she had been notified of that breach and known their passwords were the same, she would be forced to be in the position to change them everywhere, which is my point of, I think next year we'll start seeing more awareness. And know that I'm shooting with a corked bat. These are really just me, Johnny, foreshadowing what we're going to be talking about next year. But the point being is I think you'll see more populace separating the passwords, which means the blast radius of any one impacted service has less impact across my space other than the identity aspect, right? Social security numbers, BII, things like that. But around credential to credential, like if you noticed in the Xfinity attack, they talked about how people are already seeing Coinbase accounts attacked with those passwords, password spraying as a result of those things. And so you're starting to see that already play out. So anyways, we're like 6 minutes past the news and 2 rants in or 4 rants in. So let's go ahead and jump over to Robin Harris, and we'll come back and get into the rest of the predictions for 2024. I'm looking forward to seeing you. And please comment in the YouTube on Pax8 Cloud so we can put your comments up and ask us questions. Let's get a good conversation going, y'all.
(2024) It's going to bring in a lot of new opportunities and some new threats. And a trend that I'm seeing, and I like this kind of trend, I'm seeing our customers are becoming more security conscious and they're asking questions. That may occur as, please fill out this security questionnaire, or please let us see your SOC 2 report, or please answer these additional questions. Potential partners, investors, existing partners going through their audits, we're getting all of these questions. And what I'm noticing is the questions are starting to reflect an increase in maturity in their understanding of the security environment and what's needed to perform at a certain level. For a large company, this can actually get to be a full-time responsibility. So you may have to slot someone, get someone trained, get someone skilled so that they can address these kinds of third-party interests. Because it's not gonna decrease, it's gonna increase, especially as we move into the AI era. There's gonna be new kinds of threats, new kinds of concerns, new kinds of guardrails we need to put up, and people are going to start asking questions. So that is one of the trends that I'm noticing. And as more and people integrate artificial intelligence into their environment, the whole topic of AI governance. Some companies are ahead of their time and they're doing it right now. If you're starting to integrate AI into your environment and, oh, it's so cool, it's so fun, it's so awesome, you need to be integrating the guardrails. Setting standards of what your employees can do and what they can't do. How they play with these tools, what kinds of information they put in there. So you're going to see more trends around the risk associated with emerging technologies. We're going to have to put more controls in place. For some, it's going to be like, oh, you're tying my hands a little bit. But sometimes we have to slow down to speed up. Go fast, but safe. You can expect that if you're starting to play a bigger game and you're attracting more sophisticated clients and customers and investors, you can expect the questions they ask are going to be harder. Be prepared. Be prepared to answer the hard questions.
All right, Dom.
Man, first level up of the year, another whopper.
Yeah. Well, she hit it really hard on the end. Like, that's part of what we're talking about this year is that deeper question and being prepared to answer deeper questions and as a thematic aspect. So Let's pop up a comment. We've got our YouTube comments. I want to remind everybody, if you're in the YouTube for Pax8, Pax8 Cloud, I can get your comments on the screen and show where you came from. If you're in my LinkedIn, I'll be glad to mention the stuff you put in there. I just can't bring it on screen, so bear with me. Okay, MSP Madman, which I love the graphic. Thank you. And what were your 2023 predictions, and how many of them came true? I kind of cheated a little bit last year, if I'm honest. I made one giant prediction. I made a macro prediction. I did it on LinkedIn. You can go back and look at it. I think it's also on YouTube. But I really just talked about, and Dom, this came from you and I talking at Christmas that year before, in December, and we were kind of talking about during the downtime. We're like, man, what are we going to see next year? You remember what we came up with, Dom?
The False Claims Act issues coming to roost was a big one that we saw plenty of.
That is true. That is true.
The repetitive, long-standing, repeat victimized vulnerabilities that were just rampant all year.
Looking at you, Move It. Looking at you, Citrix Bleed. Looking at you, a million of them. I think we had 50,000 CVEs in 2023 or something like that. Massive.
Year. Yeah.
Massive. I think back to your point, the prediction that we made of kind of this False Claims Act aspect. For everybody's edification that doesn't know, the Department of Justice Civil Cyber Fraud Initiative, the CCFI, was announced October 21st or October 6th or something, 2021. And they stood on stage in the middle of a conference with CISA and said that we are going to be using an 1863 law called the False Claims Act against people that have had contracts with the government around cybersecurity, of their reasonableness of their cybersecurity, was the way it was written. Right? We're going to be using the False Claims Act, which is a Civil War era law, 1863, that actually says, hey, we can sue you for what we've paid you if we find you to be in breach of the contract you signed with us. Now, at that time, it was pointed at canteens and leather riding stuff, right? But ultimately, and not for motorcycles. We're talking like horses, just to put it in perspective. But and now here we're using it against cyber fraud. And does anybody know how much they actually used it for in 2022 and 2023? $2.2 billion. It was $2.2 billion in civil cyber fraud initiative work. And so I think I would parlay our prediction last year into a continued prediction on that this year. Obviously, I think it's a freebie. We can just move the marker to next year. And then the other one that wasn't covered was we had started seeing this maturation of the MSP. Starting to see education, my classes are being attended. You see the rise of cybersecurity educators like James Azar and Gerald Auger and Wes Spencer and John Strand and Andrew Morgan, and just tons and tons of pundits educating around cybersecurity. We'd seen that play out in 2022. And so at the end of 2022, you and I said that January 2023, that we were going to see a rapid increase in maturation as a result of some of those aspects in the market, and driving the MSPs and SMB serving market to be more educated on cyber. And then we got hit in the face with that, didn't we, Dom? We went to an exchange event, dude, hard. I felt dumb at the way I approached that boardroom that we presented, because I didn't know how mature the people were in the room. I even assumed the maturity curve and was wrong, right? We came in to talk about risk, wasn't it, Dom? We were going to talk a very baby version of quantitative or qualitative risk decision-making. And everybody in the room was like, yeah, we know. Yeah, we got that.
Yeah.
Let's move on to deeper topics about this.
That's interesting.
And it was just awesome.
That was exchange security, right? That particular flavor.
June-ish, or whatever.
June-ish, yeah. And we went to it in 22 in, where was it? It was Reston. And that conversation would have floated so well there.
We're crushed.
Right? And it was really cool. I really appreciated it. It let us kind of get off script and have deeper conversations, and just
we pivoted into CIS mapping.
Yeah.
I remember we had to pivot into stuff they cared about. It was interesting. So I think we crushed that, Madman. To your point. So the predictions for the past were really this growth of the MSP, and I'd like to kind of go maybe into where we see this going for MSPs next year. And when we were in pre-show, Dom, you kind of brought up the impact side of it, and I'll talk about the positive side first, and let you kind of tackle the other side. But I think if last year was the year of starting execution around cybersecurity, and I really mean posture of your own selves, MSPs, but I'm talking about this.
Yes.
I'm talking about you protecting you and you understanding how you would do it as you, so you can have any shot in hell of doing it as them, right? And I think that's what that piece of it, that maturation that we saw. So, oh, Daniel Mitchell, I love you so much. Okay, we're going to get to it in a minute. I got a comment on LinkedIn, just grabbed my left eye. But anyways, the point is, I think what we're going to see, if that was the year of maturation in like their understanding and the ability to start doing these things and actively do it, I really believe that 2024 is the year of proving it. And what I mean by that is you will see MSPs start having governance in their world. Everybody thinks towards selling it to their clients. There'll be a market one day. Let's focus on you. Let's focus on you. You point your fingers at vendors and say they suck. You point your fingers at your clients and say they suck. But guess what? Just like I said at GERCON, you suck too. We all need to grow in this, right? And so we have to focus first as MSPs on ourselves and how we're going to implement and do these things, how we're going to have principles of least privilege, how we're going to have those things. And then as we play it out, proving it. Why? To defend yourself. The world's changing on culpability, on responsibility, on how you're going to play out what you're doing. And so, yeah, anyway, so I think that we're going to see this year, we're already in this year, be a year of real proof that if I said I'm doing these things, I am doing these things, and the ability to deliver upon that. And that means GRC in some form or fashion, governance, right, risk and compliance management, whether that's on an Excel sheet or whether it's in a GRC platform. I don't think MSPs yesterday is good enough for tomorrow in that regard. And I think 2024 will try.
I lost count of how many MSP focused, not even coming from the enterprise, but like raw, freshly made MSP focused GRC platforms have come out. There's a ton. I don't even know how many, but I feel like at least once a quarter I saw a couple new ones come out. So the tools and tech behind it are rapidly coming to market too.
Agreed. And maturing and getting easier and being more automated and being deeper into the data. So I think that's that. I don't think they'll do a particularly broad job, and I don't think they'll do a particularly deep job at this. In fact, I'm part of the CompTIA Trust Mark working group. And if you're not aware of it, MSPs, go look it up. Go to CompTIA and go to their Trust Mark page. And what you'll find is we've revamped that in a way that's applicable to you, it's applicable to your customers, it's applicable to vendors in different lenses, but the same way. And really, MSPs are starting to head down that path. And I'll give you why I believe this prediction. We had like 340 or something MSPs on the backlist trying to buy the $2,000 a year assessment platform to get the Trust Mark. It's mattering, right? And you're starting to see this play out where they're wanting to get some sort of proof that they at least are doing something where they should be doing it. And that program will require that type of GRC governance capabilities inside your organization. So I'm playing with a corked bat a little bit on this prediction.
Even in the conversation of the consumer not being, or the provider not being too much more mature than the consumer, if you take that out of it, because right now your customers don't know what the Trust Mark logo is, and they don't give a damn. They still don't care about the Microsoft partner logos, by the way, if we're being honest. But
still haven't cared about that, unfortunately. I love you, Microsoft, but it doesn't change anything.
Yeah. But if we think it from our own perspective, when I was running an MSP, I did not want to be the MSP that got popped, and we have a prediction on that coming up. But I would love to have had that Trust Mark in place just for my own comfort, just so I can sleep at night saying that I did all these things. And it's not just me saying, yep, I did it. Right?
Exactly.
It's someone else validating that I'm doing it is a massive comfort thing for me, at least.
And maybe that's a better distillment of what we're actually seeing here. MSPs will stop shooting from the hip and start using industry accepted, reasonable things that they can prove. And they are going to be looking for that validation of what that is. And it's starting to exist, right? You're starting to see that work being done, both here at Pax8 and also at many of our partners and vendors that we work with. So I think I don't want to miss out on a couple of comments here as well on this, and I got one more thing to ask of you on this, which is the inverse of that, right, Dom? But Daniel Mitchell said, how much farther you can go when you skip the basics. That's fair, right? Like saying it is the basics in cybersecurity. It is so many of those things. You know, it goes on to say, I know MSPs that still don't even use MFA, that don't do those basic things. And well, what is MFA? Well, it's
I know MSPs that get mad at me when I tell them it's mandatory. It's
yeah. And we've got a comment we're going to bring up from Brian Hubbard because he is probably right on the nose of where we are with this. But, Don, let's talk about this just a little deeper. No, we'll come back to Brian here in a second. I'm sorry, y'all. It's on me. So, Don, let's talk about this just a little bit further. So, when you think about it, one of the other predictions that goes along with that governance aspect, and it goes with Robin Harris's statement, which is, I think we'll also see more demand from those customers. right? Again, I might be cheating here. I'm speaking to a whole bunch of CISOs here at the end of February for companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi and several others in that large enterprise space. And what am I going to be talking to them about? Like, what do I have to offer an enterprise? You know what I have to offer an enterprise? I'm going to start with this one question. If you're in the audience and you get it, you should let me know. Honestly, don't cheat yourself or me, right? But tell me, Dom, you're familiar with this like major breach that happened circa 2013, 2014, involving credit cards at a major circle-based retailer, let's say, right? Does anybody know which one that is? Yeah. Okay, it's Target, right? That's not the one you get the points for from me. Does anybody know the company that was the HVAC company? Don't you Google and don't you cheat yourself. But does anybody know the HVAC company that was responsible for the Target breach? It's Fazio Mechanical Services. And my point to these CISOs in the enterprise space is that nobody gives a crap about Fazio. They're not remembered. Right. They're not known. Nobody cares. And Fazio, if you're listening, I love you. I didn't mean you. But my point is that if you think about that, my argument to these enterprise CISOs is your biggest risk probably exists at the SMB that lives below the cybersecurity poverty line. And you need to do better than a simple giant questionnaire that they cannot even understand the questions they're being asked to determine where does your risk exist. And if you don't, guess what? Nobody will care about Fazio. They'll care about you. It'll be your name. And so coming from that, I think the prediction for 2024 is you will start seeing more and more of those type of assessments of trying to figure out from an assessment perspective, is this SMB protecting my asset that they're entrusted with or not? And do they have the ability to govern this themselves? Do they have the ability to have a cybersecurity program? And I think you can ask those questions easily of MSPs. And an MSP could give you a very good understanding, yes or no, at a litmus level, whether or not they are actually going to be protecting that as a company and an asset, right? And so I think prediction is you'll see the trickle up to MSPs, be clients being asked more rigorous questions or different questions, and MSPs being in the place to have to answer those questions honestly. And I think you're going to see more things like what we saw insurance do in 2021, 2022, and 2023, drive through governance and through contracts, through businesses. Anyway,
that's interesting, and you made me come up with another prediction, but I think it's more of a hope and less of a prediction. So I hope
that's fair. I'm in with those.
We expose in a much more broad fashion what the actual damages are, right? We very often talk about cybercrime as the third largest economy in the world. Right,
yeah,
right below
15% per annum.
The U.S. and China, right, with the fastest growth rate in the world, right? That's a problem.
3 times China.
But nobody else knows that, right? Nobody outside of our circle of practitioners and hopefully MSPs, now that all of us have been screaming about it from the rooftops, knows that. I would love that data to be more circulated, to get in the hands of small business, whether it's through the SBA, whether there's more sort of investigative journalism around those numbers and more academic studies. But I would really love that data to be in the hands of more consumers so that they can start to issue those challenges with something to stand on, that they know that this is an issue that's costing trillions. Let's do something about it.
Daniel in LinkedIn said, what? They have like the 4th largest GDP, speaking of, and GDP being gross domestic production, but the 4th largest GDP, speaking of cybercrime as a summative number, and it's actually the 3rd. It is the United States, which is slightly larger than China, growing at about 2-point-something% per annum in GDP. China growing at like 5.6% per annum in GDP, but in 2nd place. And cybercrime slightly in 3rd place with a prediction to exceed China and U.S. in the next few years. So yeah, 100%. They're the 3rd largest GDP based on that statement and growing. They are being a relative ephemeral understanding of all of the cybersecurity in general. So, or cyber losses everywhere. Okay,
so we talked about the growth of governance. Let's flip it on its head. So there's another edge to that sword. What if you're the MSP that isn't advancing in this, right? That you haven't taken the initiative to go ahead and do this. And this comes back to the whole False Claims Act conversation, but also brings in insurance subrogation. It brings in clients looking to hold you liable directly and whether or not your insurance can take care of it. Yeah, and it comes back to whether or not you're going to continue to exist as a business based on damages to your financials or your reputation, or depending on what space you work in, like criminal liability. So my point being is I think if you're not growing in this space and you're not taking action to build mature cyber programs, some MSPs are going to get hit with the sharp side of the stick really hard, right? Depending on who they serve.
And that doesn't always mean, and this will predict us into the next prediction, Dom. We'll kick into this and we'll start down that path. That doesn't always mean getting your clients to buy it and do it. If I say to you as an MSP, you need to protect or you're going to be in trouble, you know where your brain goes? Tell me I'm wrong. Put me in the comments if I'm wrong. It goes right to you being able to sell your clients and getting your clients to do the right thing to protect themselves. That's not the problem. The problem is your ability to say that you did the right things. You can document your level of when you accept this or don't accept this risk. You can show that you've got things in place to protect yourself, that you have a mature governance capability, and that you tried to get your clients to do it up to the point that you decided it was too much risk or not, and that you've thought about those things. So when we get into this conversation, the challenge is not on your ability to get your clients there. This is just the ability for you to be there and to have the governance and documentation to understand where your clients' giant gaps are. And when those contracts come a-calling, make sure you actually know how to deliver what you're selling. And I'm just being dinged to death, so I'm just going to let y'all know we got some extra dings in here. This is just for each prediction. But the point is, I think, I do believe that you're going to start seeing the MSPs really come to grasp with, wait a minute, I'm a business. Wait a minute, I've got to protect me. Wait a minute, I'm like that small business and I'm like that vendor. All of us have no great security posture. So I do predict those are some of the outpourings of this that you will see MSPs shift their focus from just selling it to their client, which they have to do. Like, I get it. Like, you have to go make revenue. You know, me and David Powell joke all the time about, yeah, Matt, but without me, there'd be no you. True story. Like, you got to be able to go sell it. Like, I totally agree. Right. But at the end of the day, I do think the risk burden will be based on how well you govern and how well you make documentation and prove. You've all said to your technicians, if it ain't in the ticket notes, it didn't happen. Well, the same thing applies to cybersecurity. The same thing applies to the technical and operational aspects of cybersecurity, right? So anyways, at least like we got tons of
It's not a policy. Awesome. It's not a rule.
Yeah, exactly. Without, right? Anyways, don't get me started. I think you're right. So let's move out of this. I think we talked about the negatives. And the other negative would be, if you can't answer these questions, you will start losing business because that business wants to survive and they need the questions answered, right? And so I think as an MSP, it is in your best interest to be ready to deal with that. We've got a lot of comments in, but one I want to tackle on is JB talking about, or Justin Bradley, who's a great friend of us, great friend of the show. Love you to death, buddy. And what a great picture. Oh, you're snagging his picture too?
That's a great
You guys
picture.
are so pro.
Man.
So pro. Okay. So JB said, I miss you, Matt and Dom, right? And then he said, AI, Worm GPT, or jailbroken chat GPT APIs informing malware attacks in real time. So what he's really actually getting to is, like, you're now starting to see this proliferation of the threat surface, right? The threat landscape, not the surface, but the threat landscape. And I agree with you, Justin. I think, Dom, what are your thoughts on, at least initially, how does this threat landscape change for MSPs?
We've seen it. We saw it moments after ChatGPT. After we realized ChatGPT could write code, we were like, "Oh shit, let's see what we can make out of this." And I think John Hammond was one of the early ones that put out a YouTube video where he educationally talked ChatGPT out of following the rules. Marcus Hutchins did it, and there's a lot of sensation around that. But it's all true. It's happened
since then. Like, a lot of maturation in that capability. You've got, like, even JB named 3, right? Worm GPT's 1, jailbroken chat GPTs in general as a statement, right? But then there's also XXX GPT, there's fraud GPT, there's like 7 of them that I've at least run across, right? I mean, allegedly.
We're just now starting to attack this because there's no, hypothetically, and I'm not a lawyer, so someone can correct me, but I'm pretty sure it's not illegal to write a piece of ransomware. Right? You have not broken any laws by writing code that does. Or else
John would be in a lot of trouble. yeah, that's fair.
Right. Yeah, it is very illegal to distribute ransomware for malicious purposes. There's a lot of
to use ransomware in the system you do not own.
Yes, exactly. And this just flashed my desk, and I honestly didn't have a chance to read it, but it came in the Purple Arrow thing from the FBI.
Oh, from Interguard. And I saw that.
Yeah. They put out there that the FBI had just arrested 4 people in connection with using AI tools to write ransomware. And I unfortunately didn't have time to read it, but I'm really curious to know, did they catch them working around tools and maybe hit them with the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of misusing property? Or did they catch them in possession of code that was found elsewhere? I don't know, but it's really interesting. The point being is, I think law enforcement and spooky agencies are starting to pay attention to this, but you need to pay attention to it too. It's never been easier to morph a piece of code to make it harder to detect. You upload it, well, AI does a thing, and you download it.
Even if you take it away from code, right? Think about what Fraud GPT and XXX GPT are so good at. They're like, hey, scrape this LinkedIn profile, see what Jennifer likes the most. Make sure, since she runs Mandian's X profile, let's say, right? And then send her this crafted payload, and like, all that research can be fast. I can make that almost automatic. I can output an attack profile really quickly, right, through these type of tools. And so I think that goes to my next point is, in combination with your prediction of this increase in the capabilities and JB's kind of statement there, right, and Justin Bradley's statement there, you also have, I think, this other understanding of the criminal element in its generality is going to understand MSPs are a better target soon, right? If I hope it's not because of this prediction, but I will say, like, if I was going to make a decision to go bad, if I decided I was now all of a sudden bad Mattlee instead of cybermattlee, then I think I would attack MSPs. Most of you are not thinking about you yet. It would be a cool looking logo. But you're not thinking about this yet. You're all talking about your clients. You're talking about that world. And just like in the airlines, put your mask on first, then put their mask on, isn't happening. Which means that as you sit there and talk about this, how many of you have segmentations that say this technician can only access those 5 clients, right? And because that's the 5 clients they're working on, right? How many of you have that ability to do blast radius reduction and have the capability of detection, have the capability of response? Now, a lot of you have hired a malware vendor, but I'm going to go attack your cloud platform or steal a token, an identity. I mean, those things are things where we're pivoting, and they're all spoken for in good cybersecurity hygiene and in good posture by following CIS. Right? If you followed the 153 all the way to IG3, you're spoken for in most of these things.
If we pull this back to supply chain, do your vendors and your products, be it your RMM or your PSA, support PLP so that you can say technician B can only access
they often don't.
clients in
they
Texas?
Often don't.
Yeah, I know.
I played that football game. Ask me how I know. Right, and so I want to catch up on some comments real quick. Louis Geraldo, good to see you, buddy. I love you, Luis. You're my boy. I did his podcast first. He did my podcast first on several podcasts. Happy New Year. Daniel Mitchell talked about one-to-many hacks. That's exactly what I'm talking about here, Daniel, right? Is that I would rather attack you because I've got 60 U's that I get for free when I attack you. And it brings me to this point of maybe the general understanding for MSPs this year is the value of my data, right? We talk about risk, right? We talk about risk in general. And risk is calculated on this whole kind of like likelihood times impact, if we were going to get super simplistic about it. And if you think about it, your impact is the summation of all of your clients' impact, right? Like if you have sensitive data at client 74 or 12 and sensitive data at 3 and HIPAA at 6 and those things, and you get compromised, your risk and cost is the summation of those. Ask me how I know. I've been sued by those. Right? And when you start getting down to it, the value is more than we even paid for the company. We lost more than we paid for the MSP that we bought. And my argument is that you're going to see threat actors pivot to that, which means you're going to see impact pivot to that. And I've already known of 2 incidents in the last 30 days that have played out where MSPs were hit, mass ransomware, right? I didn't actually serve on them, so I'm not going to speak towards it, but I've learned of them. And so the point is you're starting to see those one-to-many hacks and the return on it, and then the actual attack surface is larger. Most of your clients probably don't have an RDS server, don't have remote access capabilities. You do. You have an RMM that's globally available. You have things that are done to aggregate all that risk in one place that you wouldn't even see in your clients. And so I don't want to beat this to death too much. I'm getting on my high horse here, but
too, though, if we're spending all of our energy securing those clients and not securing ourselves, threat actors aren't dumb. And it's not because we're saying it here on YouTube. It's because threat actors aren't dumb. They're going to know that they just need to shift fire to the up, right, to the next level in the chain.
Yeah.
Right. We saw it with Kaseya, which in my mind is more of a supply chain attack and less of an MSP centric attack. But we saw that with the huge Kaseya incident that hit on the 4th of July and everything else, and that trickle down effect. The softer target right now today is that MSP service provider layer. So you're right. If I was suddenly going to become a threat actor, my fire would be wholly focused on the center of the channel.
Me too. And I mean, obviously, I don't want this to be foreshadowing for some trial. So I want you to know I will never go bad. Like, just want to put that out there.
Same.
But if I were to, it certainly would be against you. Yeah. Okay. So I want to bring up something else that's kind of a tangent from the first prediction and almost somewhat proving this down the path. Brian Hubbard's comment. Let's bring him up. This is actually just a brilliant question in general. And so he says, listen, Matt and Dom, CMMC proposed rule has a significant ramification for MSPs. Any predictions on that? And what he's talking about is not just proposed rule. In fact, if you remember, the final law has been written on it. You can go follow Jacob Horn or any of the players at Summit 7. But they said it was a Christmas miracle, right? We actually did get the law signed that makes CMMC a reality. And that in that actual filing, it essentially says MSPs are going to have to be level 2 if they're serving level 2. And without even getting into the deeper conversations on this, right, there's some other things around non-FCI, non-CUI, or federal contract information, controlled and classified information, I suppose, for our dings. But yeah, Brian, I think you're seeing that as being a bit of this general understanding of the shared responsibility for protecting an SMB. SMBs live below the cybersecurity poverty line. If they don't have you, they don't survive. That's just the way I see it. I really genuinely believe. I did a talk at where I am right now. I'm in Grand Rapids. I did a talk late last year at GERCON called MSPs Suck, but the world without them is worse. And the talk was really a focused way to say you're actually much better off with even the worst MSP than you would ever be with Bob, that's your cousin's aunt's nephew that's been working here for 22 years and never touched another single network segment in their world. And so you get into this world where we were showing... Maybe. I don't know. I'm not that smart. Could be 2 out trees, bro. It could be another tree out. You never know. Anyways, but the point being,
your cousin's aunt.
Don't break it down. This is redneck math. I come from North Florida. Don't forget, man. I can't help it. But But anyways, the point is, I think we are going to see. Oh man, I lost it. The cousin's mom and uncle thing just really turned me off. SPD, that's exactly it, Brian Hubbard. He called out security protection data. You can throw up that comment. Drives while MSPs are being hit hard by CMMC. And I think that's the point, shared responsibility, right? It's this point that if they're below that poverty line and they're using us to solve that, thank you, Brian. You brought me right back on track, buddy. We need to have you on here one of these days. But if it brings me right back into this understanding that it's going to be translated that if you are part of serving their operations and their security and the way we do things, then guess what? You're going to fall under the same protections and the same requirements because you're part of this team here, boys and girls. And I think to your point on SPD, I can take the inference on the security protection data, meaning I'm not protecting this data. I'm somewhat your common control, or at least at the very least shared responsibility. And I totally agree with this. I totally agree that MSPs serving that space have the hands on the wrench and the keys and the ability to destroy you. And it goes back, Brian, to my point that your risk is, as an MSP, is the summation of your client's risk. And this is exactly a point where this is coming up. And that's why I loved your comment so much, is it's right in that space of I'm now having
the easiest way to equate that. Because this came up in a prior life when I did other work. But SPD and that kind of, it wasn't called SPD at the time, but that kind of thing. Imagine you run a key cutting company, like that's your niche. So you have a file of all the keys and how they're cut for different offices in the Pentagon, right? Well, if it's the Pentagon, it probably is classified. But like, let's imagine that that's unclassified.
Let's not get too deep into the story. Variables are good.
Doesn't really fit a bucket of CUI, right?
Sure.
But holy hell, what if I stole a list of how all the keys are cut to all the doors in the Pentagon, right? And that's the same thing, just digital, right? So if that data is not well, and we've seen this before with like schematics of different buildings that get leaked and those kind of things, it creates a serious risk. But in this case,
it's how they're secured. Yeah, this now is the map for how they're secured. Now, I do find the irony in, even under NDA, sharing my SOC 2, because now I'm sharing very similar. Anyway, I digress. Sorry, side tangent. It's totally fine. Totally fine. Anyways, great, Brian. Good call out. And they tie into those two predictions. Yeah. And it ties into those two kind of predictions, right, of that. And I think the CMMC is just the first of many of those understandings that, you know, I've been preaching this for a long time as to why I feel that, especially in the SMB and mid-market and below, you're seeing a merging of security and operations, right? You're seeing this MSP, MSSP convergence conversation playing out. And I think this is kind of part of why, right? As you're starting to see, you can't turn the wrench and not be responsible for the security. You can't turn the wrench and have plans for the Pentagon and not have them protected, right? In that way, I suppose. But yeah.
And that kind of leads into another prediction, because we also saw, and I believe this wording, I think it came out with the final rule actually, and they said the cost to businesses to implement CMMC should not be dramatic outside of the cost of the assessment, because you've already promised that you have these controls in place. So hypothetically, the cost to implement the controls is zero. So that prediction for me is the government's going to call you on your shit, right? Whether you're a defense contractor,
scores may be full of
whether
crap.
you, And they've straight up said it should cost this much-ish to get an assessment. But other than that, you shouldn't have any costs because you already told us you did this. And I think that's going to play out over other industries, right? Whether it's healthcare, whether it's finance, they're not going to be so lenient on, oh, this is hard to do.
At the very least, you could see a play of an of a False Claims Act and civil cyber fraud initiative just being cannon fodder for these SPURS scores that have been filed since, what was the interim ruling? The interim ruling was like 2018 or 19. It's like 5 years ago, right? And so I think when you had to first file your SPURS scores, Brian, if you're in the crowd still, tell me when the DFARS interim ruling was that started with the SPURS reporting. But as soon as you made that first SPURS report, you've seen evidence of False Claims Act going back several years, right? You had Verizon got sued by False Claims Act for $4 million from a contract from 2021. That's 3 years ago. And now you mean to tell me you're about to expose a whole bunch of people being assessed to and I didn't mean to get into a deep CMMC QE 80171 conversation.
But it can apply more, right? Like this whole
those apply in more
expanded.
places. Yeah. 2020, thank you, Brian. It was like Christmas, right? It was right over Christmas, and boy, it changed the world for me. Like I had so many executives going, okay, now we got to get serious. Can we really do it now? I lied before, but anyways, we're beating this to death. We're going to have so many more thoughts and things that could come out of this and discussion. I really appreciate all the conversation in the chat and coming to our channels and chatting, because it really gave us a good conversation today. Thank you all. And Dom, I've got so many more we could talk about, but we're right at the end of keeping all these people's time. So let's wrap her up.
This is why when I promoted this show, I said I'm going to break out the LinkedIn crystal ball after, because I knew we wouldn't have time to cover all of our thoughts. So make sure you're following us on LinkedIn, because I'm sure we're just going to randomly throw out
let's do us a show there. All right. See y'all very much. Oh, yeah. DFARS 2016 for 7012 was in 2016. Good call out, Brian. Thank you.
What I thought. I thought it was hot when 80171 came out. But I digress. That's our show. That's our show. Thanks so much for coming to the first show of the year. Thanks so much for all the interaction. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe. All of that jazz.
Have a great year, y'all.
We'll see you next week with Bob Miller coming on the show. He's already promoting the hell out of the show, so you should already know this. Bob Miller's coming on the show next Friday, and we will see you then.
Awesome.